Hi everyone, Tim from Champhazone here. Welcome to the Revolver tutorial. I just wanted to give you a quick introduction message before we get started. And I would like to say, first of all, thank you for getting the tutorial. I've been working on it for, I think, more than half a year, ever since I finished the introduction to Blender as well as the flashbang tutorial, which I see sort of as the foundation where now we build the bigger object on, which is the revolver and two attachments for it, a flashlight and a reflex scope. So the first courses, which I already finished a few months ago, maybe you haven't even seen them yet. So I just wanted to make sure that you at least have the option to watch it. So I included the fundamentals to Blender tutorial to the whole package. I just think that if you have never touched Blender, it would be a good thing to start there and just familiarize yourself with the plugins, the modifiers, the tools. You also get to see which shortcuts I'm changing. So with these things, you will have probably a bit of an easier time than to approach the Revolver tutorial. But if you want to skip straight to that, it's no problem either. I'm trying my best to make these tutorials as approachable as possible, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a smooth or easy ride. I'm well aware that these tutorials are always a challenge to finish, same as they are for me to create. And all that I can do is listen to feedback I'm getting and try my best to make it as convenient as possible for you to follow along. So that means I'm explaining everything in real time. I also comment on everything, and I even do that for the Blender part as a post voice narration. That means I record everything first, then later I come back and talk over it, because otherwise I'm not great with the multitasking. So that helps me to really explain properly what I'm doing. And in some cases, that can even mean that I sort of like can already see into the future. So maybe there are like a few issues where I do something while I recorded it, and then later I see like, oh, I forgot something here and there. So doing the voice narration sort of already enables me to make like mentions for these kind of things. And overall, I think it's just a good approach that works for me, and hopefully also for you if you follow the tutorial. On top of that, we also have this nice plugin now that allows you to see all the actions that I was doing, like the keys I pressed, even the mouse wheel. How many times did I use the mouse wheel for some bevel actions or things like that? So if you're ever stuck, just pause the screen, take a look at it, and in general, just don't try to rush through the tutorial. See it as a marathon and not a sprint. I know it's a bit of a cheesy old saying, but it really applies here to the tutorial. So I hope you're gonna like it. I'm excited to get started. I hope you too. The high poly part is gonna be really cool once we get to do the remeasure then. But till we get there, we have a lot of old-fashioned modeling to do. I mean, nothing is ever old-fashioned, but proven modeling techniques, making use of crease edges, modifiers, plugins, so everything as you would expect it. And then we get to do our high polys with a new approach, which actually necessarily isn't a new approach because people have been doing it in ZBrush before. But now we get to do this whole remeshing in Blender. So this is something I'm excited to share with you as well as everything else, and I hope you're gonna like it. Let's get started. Happy modeling and cheers. Hey guys, welcome to the Revolver tutorial. I am using Blender version 2.92 And maybe there's already gonna be a newer version once this is released, but the fundamentals should be the same. I'm gonna activate this plugin here, and don't worry, you won't be needing it. It's only for me so that you get to see what actions I'm doing. So maybe sometimes you wanna be pausing the video, and that way you can conveniently see exactly what I was doing, on top of me explaining, of course. Let's take a quick look at this new feature here in Blender. It's basically a replacement for the QBlocker plugin, and it allows us to create geometry in a quick way where it automatically snaps against existing geometry. So this might be useful if you quickly want to assemble something together to see what it looks like, but we won't be needing it much. I'm going to clear the whole scene out now. Select everything and delete it. Let's go over also here to the modeling tab and go into the orthographic view. And now let's press the tilde key to get this menu and switch to left orthographic view. Now we can add a reference image, and let's select this one here. And let's get started by working on our bullet as well as the case for it. Now would also be a good time to make a save here. Don't forget to save. You won't be seeing me saving because I cut these parts out. But always remember that saving our scene is essential. I'm also gonna be lowering the opacity here for the reference image, as well as disabling the grid. And that way it's easier for you to see what I'm doing here. Now let's go over here to our unit setup and let's put it to millimeters. And now let's start by adding a cylinder. Shift A to bring up that menu. And now with that cylinder, let's go down to those properties here. I'm gonna leave it at 32 sides, and the depth accordingly here to our reference image, let's put it to 40, and the radius, let's put it to 5.6. So now what we have to do is select our reference image. I'm gonna press S, and that way we can conveniently scale that down till both the bullet as well as the case fits into our cylinder, which has an overall height now of 40 millimeter. So this just requires a little bit of fine tuning here, just to make sure this properly fits here. So whenever we have this fitting here, we will then create another cylinder which has the exact same dimensions, if we create it now, as the one we put before. So now we have a new one, but let's change the depth to 1.5 millimeter. And now let's bring it down here. If we press Shift as we drag something, it becomes a bit more precise. Let's put that to the bottom. And now we're gonna create another one. And in that case, let's put our depth here to 40 millimeter. So the reason for that is that we're gonna combine these two. This one here has a depth of 33 millimeter, by the way, and it also has a radius of 4.8. So this gives us the upper part for that case, but let's also bring it down so that the edges at the bottom are connecting here with the other edges that we have at the bottom. It doesn't have to be 100% precise, but let's just try to get it into that direction. So now we only have one more part left here, which is our bullet. And the bullet, let's put a new cylinder. It has a diameter of 4.55. Sorry, I meant a radius. So now we only have to also add the depth, and this one is 5 millimeters. So let's bring that up here. Again, we can use Shift to be more precise. So right now we don't have the height yet, but we're gonna do that in a moment. First, what we can do is delete this original cylinder that we had here. So let's push this reference image a bit back so that we got some more space here. And now let's select the centerpiece. Let's press Tab to get over to our edit mode. And then while being in X-ray mode, we're gonna select these vertex points and bring it sort of in the center of the other element. Now I'm gonna select that other element here in our face mode, and I wanna give this an inset. We can then collapse it so that this all gets connected to the center. And now let's make use of JMesh tools and let's select the upper one as a target, and then we're gonna select union. But the problem is we still have some overlapping here, and in order to make that more visible, we're gonna go to the viewport overlay and select statistics. So now we can always see whether we have 1 or 2 vertex points in one place. Next, I'm gonna select everything, press M to merge by distance, and that will properly weld everything together. Next, let's go back here to our ortho view and select the element for our bullet, and we want to bring these vertex points down here based on what we see on our reference image. Let's use the loop cut tool, and I'm gonna have one right here in the center, and then we want to select the upper vertex points, and while pressing S we can then scale it down here. So that way we already have it more looking like a bullet. I'm gonna have another inset here, and now with this selection we can make another inset and bring it down like this here. So I'm gonna have another inset, press M and then collapse that down, and then I want to select that vertex point in the center and push it down a bit. So now let's go to edge mode, select that loop here, and then with Ctrl B in combination with the mouse wheel we can have 2 segments here for it to give it a nice bevel. I want to also select it here in the inside and do the same thing to make it nice and round. And now let's go to the isolation mode, and we want to also give it a bevel here at the bottom. And we can also have 2 for it to have a nice chamfer there. Now let's select this case that we have here, and we want to go over here to our face mode and select this particular face here. I want to give it another inset, and let's make it so that it sort of like covers the bullet, and I mean to the point where we have the bullet, and then we can use extrude to bring that down here. So let's take a look here also at this part where we can see here we have a bit of a angle there. So I'm gonna make one bevel with only one segment like that, and then we can select this loop here at the bottom and bring that down in order to get this look for it. So let's take another look here at our reference image, and let's look at the bottom part here specifically, where we also have a bit of a bevel that we can do with only one segment. Now I'm going to select that face here, and we also want to be working on this part, which we can do while using the inset. So now we can push that a bit further up here, use another inset, which we're going to bring down like that. And we want to align it so that this is basically standing if you would put it up on a surface. And now let's just give this another bevel here, and let's make a connection here to the inside like that in order to have the right topology there. So I want to organize that a bit better, what we have in our layer stack, gonna call the reference image bullet reference, and then I'm gonna have a new collection here, or also a new folder is what you could call it, which I'm gonna call bullet. So I'm gonna drag these two objects in it, and then we can rename the other one as being the reference images folder. So this way we can toggle on and off our reference image folder, because sometimes we might not even want to have it in the way. So we also have to add some text to it. If you look at the reference image at the bottom, it always has some text that will tell us what kind of caliber we are using. So we can still edit the text later, but for now I'm just going to type this here: 1808 357 Magnum, and now let's add a circle here. What we can do with that circle is first of all to bring the radius down on it, and I'm gonna have it at 5 millimeters. So now we can see, if we go here into that view, that this would fit here where we want it to fit. Let's just push it down like that. So now what we have to do is select our text here, which we can do in the layer stack. And then we want to add a curve modifier to it. So whenever we have this modifier added to it, we can then go over here to this object picker, and then let's select also here on our layer hierarchy our text. And now we want to go over here to transform and put the scale down to 0.002, and we can also copy and paste that. So let's simply bring it down on the z-axis. So now you can see that it's on our circle, but we still have to change the rotation to 180 so that it looks to the inside. If we press tab, the text will basically flip back here to this typing mode, and it might be a little bit difficult to find the right angle because we're looking at it from the button. But instead of having that number there, I'm gonna call it C-zone. You can put any text you want there, maybe your last name, completely up to us. And now we can change the word spacing here to make it more even. But now I actually want to scale the text. So I'm gonna press S and scale that further up, and now we have to adjust the word spacing once more, but that way we have bigger fonts here. Now I also want to put that resolution here down to 6 so that we have it more in a, conservative amount of polygons, because we want to do some editing on it. I'm going to convert it to a mesh now. To do exactly that, I want to select all the faces here while being in edit mode, and then we're going to do an inset on it. So we press I for inset and then push it carefully in like this, and now we can drag that up, and this way we have already this nice look on it that will result in a good normal map bake. So now what we essentially have here is our low poly bullet and its case, and let's make a high poly out of it. So I'm gonna rename this whole folder to being the high poly folder, and then we can duplicate that collection and call the second one _low. So now we have the low and the high poly. I'm gonna hide the low poly folder so that we can concentrate on our high poly here. And I want to give this proper names. So this one is going to be the bullet high, and here we have our case _high. Next, what we can do is take a look at how it works with our remeasure workflow. And this is just basically going to be a sneak peek. But before we do that, I want to add one more detail here to only our high poly. For that, I'm going to be using the loop cut. Let's prepare this here by having an edge loop here at the bottom and then another one here as well. Then we can select the whole ring here by pressing Ctrl and Alt and selecting it. And then we can go over here to our scale mode and give this a little bit of an inside dent here. So we will just add this as a detail to our high poly for our normal map. We won't be adding this to the low poly. Let's take a look at our remesher workflow, which we're going to be using for all our high poly. If we go to the object mode, you see it basically becomes a box, and that's because we have to put our voxel size down to 0.1. So now the problem that we have is that our cylinder that is based on 32 sides doesn't have enough tessellation. So that's why we work hand in hand with the crease edges. I'm just going to disable the remesher modifier for now, toggle it off, go over here and say select sharp edges, and then we can go over here to our item and we want to increase that to 1, maximum crease. Now we can select individual loops and also add it to it. So basically everything that we have here, as well as this one here. So now with these creased edges, we can then add subdivision surface to it in order to make this nice and round. I'm gonna have it put to 2 amounts, and here you can see with the optimal display that we now have a proper subdivision there. And now if we turn the remesher back on, it takes a moment to load, but that way we have more resolution now. So right now it looks exactly the same as before. That's because we have to put the subdivision here on top of the remesher. Now let's just go in the remesher properties and enable our smooth shading. But most importantly, we want to be adding the smooth corrective modifier. This modifier allows us to further smooth it. I want to put this here to length weight. And then most importantly, where it says repeat, I want to increase the number. So I'm going to have it at 25. And then I also want to add only smooth here, this button. So now you can see we have a beautiful high poly model here. I'm gonna go out of the isolation mode and just select the bullet, go back into the isolation mode for it. And here I just want to collapse this so that we have proper connected vertex points and edges. And then we can individually select these loops here. Also the one here at the inside. And now we're just gonna add the crease to it. Now the great thing with this remesher workflow is that we can then just select the bullet as well as the case, and then with Ctrl L we copy it over. So it's really then almost a copy and paste job to make high poly models, and this is really just a demonstration for you to see what we're going to be working with here as we create our revolver. Basically a sneak peek for later once we get to the high poly of our revolver. Now you can see that we have a ton of polygons here for a small detail like this bullet, and we want to be adding the decimate modifier to it. So that way, if we put that to 0.1, it minimizes the poly count by 90%, and in most cases you won't even see much of a difference. So one thing to consider is that the remesher works best if we have certain elements unique. For example, down here, I want to grow the selection and separate this part out. So once we have this separated, it disappears because we are in isolation mode for this specific object. So now let's toggle off all modifiers on it. And then we can select this object here. And I want to select that loop here. So now we can fill this here, and then we select that face and extrude it up like this. So now let's select the case, and we actually have a hole there, but we don't see it. Let's enable backface culling, which makes that more clear. Let's also fill this. And now what we can do is re-enable our modifiers. And then if we go over here to our object mode, which always takes a moment to load, you can see now that it looks much sharper as before. That's why we had to separate that out. Now for this extra piece that we separated, I'm gonna call this case underscore extra. And then let's select it. And we wanna be pressing Shift in order to connect it here with our case underscore high. So make sure to press Shift, and that way it will later bake as one piece. So we also have to do that for the text. I'm gonna drag it, press Shift, and that way it also bakes here together with our case underscore high. So this was basically just to give you a sneak peek of how to create high poly with a remesher. Let's also add the decimate here to the bullet. Remember, on our left side we have the statistics, so it's always worth checking. And as we can see, the decimate works to our advantage here and takes 90% off of the poly count. I'm gonna toggle this off here for our high poly. We can always toggle it on back later. But basically, if we toggle it off, it doesn't cost us the performance as if it was on. Now let's go into our bullet underscore low folder and also give these here the proper names, which correspond to our high poly. So whatever is called underscore high in the low poly needs to be underscore low. We can delete the text and this circle in our low poly folder. We only need that for the high poly. So here, back to our high poly folder. I forgot to toggle off the modifiers here for this piece. So I just want to turn these off so it doesn't cost us the performance, and later we can turn it back on. Now let's show both the low poly and the high poly. So now let's press Ctrl A and apply all transforms. And now let's rotate that while pressing Ctrl. And we're gonna rotate it 90 degrees. And now what we can do is hide the high poly folder as well as the reference folder. I'm going into our left orthographic view and I want to be back here into our reference images folder. By clicking on it, we make it active. And now we're gonna add another reference image into it. So this is going to be our main reference image that we will be using a lot. And now we just have to also put the opacity down on it. And another thing that I want to do is to put our units set up from millimeters to centimeters, because most of our units on this reference image are centimeters. So that way it's just more convenient for us to also work with it. So I'm gonna drag that back here so we have more space. And now let's get started with our cylinder. I want to increase this here to 64 sides. And then let's take a look at the cylinder length, which is 4 centimeters. So let's put it to that. And now we have a radius of 2.159. So let's put that in there as well. It's gonna switch it to 2.16, but that's okay. Now we're gonna rotate it here by pressing Ctrl again. And that way we have it already in the right direction. Now we can select our reference image here. And we wanna press S, same as before. And you can see here my scale, by the way. That way you see exactly the numbers that I have. And that way you can make sure that we have the same thing here. You could even manually type that in here, where it says scale XYZ. So basically I'm just gonna fit that in here as good as we can. So now let's double check by adding a block out for our barrel. You can see it's 12.7 centimeter is what it says on the reference image. And if we drag that here all the way to the cylinder where it starts from and it fits, that means our reference image has the perfect scale. And we can also check the smaller sizes. You can see here our rail has 1 centimeter here for one of these tiles. So let's just have a box with 1 centimeter and it looks like it fits perfectly. So that way we double check that our reference image has the right scale, and now we can delete these boxes again. So if you want, you can load this scene in the Essential folder. It will give you everything to this point, but probably you just want to stick to your own model, and that's also what I recommend. So now let's unhide the high poly and let's select it with a low poly, and then we carefully drag it like this here so that these lines here are matching up so that this sticks out here at the end of it. Now let's drag it to the left side, make sure that Z stays at 0. And now what we can do is hide our high poly. So let's make a copy of this. Right mouse button to snap it back to place, and then Ctrl J to join it into one object. So I'm gonna call that bullet merged. So that way we can work with a placeholder bullet and we don't have to worry about our original low and high poly, which we can leave in place and hide it. So now let's make another copy of everything here. Let's hide the first bullet merged, so we're only having this one selected. Now I want to make a ring selection here on that big part of the case, convert it to face mode, Ctrl I to make a reverse selection and then delete everything. So this way we are only left with this side here of the cylinder, and we can scale it here on this one axis. And that way we have the perfect Boolean shape here for our cylinder. And now we can make a new folder. Let's call it Revolver, and let's drag the cylinder in it. So that's going to be our first piece that we will be working on. I'm going to select this outer face here, and I'm going to make an inset here and leave it here like this. Now let's switch to our edge mode. And let's select all these edges that are essentially in the way of where we want to make the Boolean operation. So I'm going to press X and then delete those edges. This will give us a complete cutout of everything. Now let's select it and fill it back. So that way we have only faces here. It's basically a big N-gon. Let's select this piece, and now let's use JMesh tools. I'm gonna select the cylinder as a target, and now we can say difference. So that way we have this here already as the first piece. And here on that side, let's delete these two faces. Let's concentrate here on that side. I'm gonna zoom in a bit, and I want this here to be connected. Let's select both words and press J. So now let's select this center piece and hit Ctrl+ to grow the selection. And now I'm gonna deselect everything aside from these active ones and delete them. So now let's also select the faces that belong here to this part, and let's also delete them. So that way we are left here with basically only this element. And this here I'm gonna separate out. So let's separate this here as something that we can work on uniquely. And that makes it easier for us to work on that cylinder. So let's just select that here. And now let's add a mirror modifier on it. I'm gonna put it to Y. And now we can work on one side and it will translate over here to the other side, as you can see. So now is the time to make some more connections here. By pressing J we can do that. And here I'm gonna be using our cut tool. K for the cut tool. Just to get some more edges in there than we currently have. So now maybe Let's also have one here. And for that, I'm gonna use J again and work with the vertex points that we already have in place there. So now we can carry on here with what's left of it. A lot of people are always worried to create triangles, but don't worry. We're doing that on a flat surface and it's no problem. Now we can use the circle array on that. And if we put the item count to 8, you can see that everything fits perfectly here. Let's hit close on that. That will confirm the operation. And next, we can take a look here and see that we have this element here as a unique element, and we can already work on that. So now let's delete that face here. We could have already done that earlier, but let's just do it now. And what we can do is on one of these elements, we're gonna select these faces here. By the way, if we put this little triangle here on, we also see what's going on our mirrored side. So now if we make a Shift-D copy of it, we have a copy of it together with our modifier stack, and we're already getting this shape here. So I'm gonna make this the active selection. We can double check here, by the way, if we toggle on and off our modifiers, but let's apply it so that everything is merged and this is all one piece. But now we have to also weld everything. 32 vertex points are getting welded that way. Now we can switch over to the face mode for it, select everything and extrude it out like that here. So now let's unhide our cylinder, and we don't want to have too much height on that. It's going to be a rather thin element. So now in order to get this kind of a look that we see here, where these edges are, we can take this selection that we currently have and scale it in a bit, like this here. Just a tiny amount. And now what I want to do is select all these edges that we have here. And then whenever we have this selection, we can get rid of it. Or actually, instead of getting rid of it, we can go over here to the top view and drag it like this here. So that way this looks more like a nice curve. Now let's make a ring selection on these inside parts and let's delete the edges. Then we can select the loop and fill it back up here. And then what we can do with that is extrude it out. So that way we have this coming out here as seen on the reference image. And now let's isolate it, and here at the back what we can do is select these loops here, or this one loop, and then let's just collapse it like that. It doesn't look very pretty that way, but it doesn't have to. So now let's get out of the isolation and let's take a look here at these teeth. And while we're at it, let's also work on that. So I'm gonna have a new cylinder and I want to put that one to 0.4 for the radius, and the depth I'm gonna have it at 5 centimeters. I'm gonna put the vertex count down to 16, and then we can rotate it over here. The reason why I put it so low is because these faces are then easier to work with based on what we want to create. And now let's take a look here at it in the X-ray mode. Actually, let's go over to the loop cut and let's make a loop here right at the end here basically of this, so that it's sort of like hidden there under this other element. And that way we can now make a selection here for every second face. And whenever we have that, we're gonna go over here to our toolbar and we wanna be having extrude along normals. So that way we can now use this slider here to bring this out like that. And then let's do it again. Now we can switch to the rotation and give it a bit of a twist. So now I'm gonna select every one of these faces here. And then with that selection, we can go ahead and once again use our extrude here based on normal direction. And now with this, all we have left to do is select every one here of these edges at the bottom. And once we have that selection, we can then dissolve it. So that way this looks more like how it should be. So now let's unhide our bullet merged here and let's select it. And now let's press Ctrl A to get the pivot point back into the center. So only for location, but that enables us then to use the rotation circle array here in order to fill these slots. And now let's say you would have a problem here with an overlap. We can go back to this original piece here because we still have the modifiers on it, and you could then basically push it a little bit more to the left side if you have overlapping. But in my case, I don't have it. So we can then carry on here by further adding details here to the cylinder. But before we do that on that side, let's copy over what we currently have here on this side to the other side. For that, I'm gonna make a copy of this element and then rotate it over here like this. And then we can get rid of these faces because we already have them in place. We only want to have it here at the front. Let's enable the mirror modifier. And with our circle array, it's kind of messed up. So I'm going to delete it. And we're just going to make it new here. So let's redo that. Again, we're going to have 8 items. And now we can apply these modifiers. And as usual, I want to go over here to our merge mode. And it tells me 56 vertices are merged. Now I'm going to cap this here, same as we did before. And then I want to make an inset and collapse it down like this here. So this way we have this all nice looking here. And now with this element, I'm going to select these vertex points and I'm just going to delete them. So that way we only have this piece left. We can cap it here at the back. And let's also do this classic collapse to the center. So the same here on that side. And now let's work on this detail that we were just having a look at on the reference image. I'm gonna go over here to the X-ray mode and select these faces that are basically covered by this other element that we created. And by pushing that in and then re-enabling all our modifiers, we basically have this shape that we wanna have there. It has this dent. Now I'm gonna apply the modifiers here. And I'm just gonna select everything, and as always I want to merge it. I have 56 vertices merged. I just always like to mention that so that we're on the same page and you can compare it to yours, but you can also always see it at the bottom where it says it. So I'm gonna drag this object in here where we now have this dent. And now let's switch over here to the left orthographic view. So I want to push that out a bit here, these vertex points. And you can see on the reference image, it's a little bit too big what we have. I'm going to grow the selection with Ctrl+. And then with pressing S, we can then scale that down here. Let's take another look, and it's still a bit too big, so let's keep going. And now it seems to be right, so I'm gonna select the other piece and do the same thing here. Let's scale that down, and obviously we have to push it back out now. And also further in. So now it looks like this is more how it's intended to look, and before it was just a little bit too big. I'm gonna select both these pieces here as well as this one. So we have 3 pieces in total, and I'm gonna press Ctrl J to join them. So we have now this piece here as one element. I'm gonna press A and then merge them together. You can see it says 384 vertices merged. Quite a lot. But now we have it as one piece, and we can fill this element back up here, as well as having like this center connection. So looking at our reference image, we can see that we have a bit of a bevel there. So in order to replicate that, I'm gonna have a loop cut, bring it quite close here to where this ends, make a ring selection for this piece, convert it over to vertex. That way we have these vertex points selected here, and then we can deselect the ones here on the right side and scale down the ones that we have selected. So that way we can conveniently get this kind of a bevel look there, as we can see it here on our reference image. This one here. So this is in place. And by the way, we got these empty circles here. I think they happen when we do a circle array. We can delete them so that they're not in the way. So now we also want to add these dents here. And we're gonna simply make a ring selection here on the inner part of one of these, convert it to face mode, make a copy, snap it back, and separate the selection for it. So now let's switch to vertex mode and select these vertex points, and then we're gonna press SY0 to align it. And that didn't select all the vertex points, so I'm gonna have to do it again. SY0. So now the faces are actually inverted. We have to select everything and go to normals and flip it. Now let's also cap this part here so that it's filled with geometry. Let's get out of this isolation mode. And now we're gonna make use of the Interactive Tools plugin for the quick origin. So that way we have the pivot in the center. And that way we can then drag this up here, the cylinder. And let's zoom in here so that you see how I got this positioned here. You can see that the cylinder is still within these edges. It's not overlapping. So this is just like one thing to consider here for it. And now I'm gonna bevel this here. And I'm gonna do that 4 times. So we have the segments put to 4, and now with that selection, let's scale this out a bit here like this. In the background we see our reference image, and based on that we want to push it out a bit here to the right side. And for this element here, it should be a bit more pointy here. So what we're gonna do is push it also further. And then let's extrude that out here and collapse it. So now we have this in place. Let's cap this here at the end. And basically that gives us a nice element that we can use the Boolean on. But before we do that, let's select this element here, our cylinder. And I'm gonna make use of the loop cut tool, and I want to bring it as close as possible here to this other edge that we have on our Boolean operator. We can also go into the X-ray mode for that. And then let's add another edge loop here on the right side. And this is just so that we have some support loops which we're gonna be connecting here once we're done with the Boolean operation. So let's press Ctrl A and let's apply a location transformation. That way the pivot is in the center and we can then use our circle array again, and we're gonna have 16 copies. It's perfectly aligned that way. Then we can collapse the layers, or I mean the modifier, and then we're gonna select every second one here, count it from the top, and press Ctrl L, which will select them, and then we're gonna delete the faces, which leaves us only with every second one from the right. I'm gonna disable apply immediately here on the Booleans, select our cylinder, and then let's hit difference. So that way we still have our operator editable and we can hide it and take a look at it, and everything seems to work great. So I'm gonna apply the Booleans on it. So now it's actually a committed operation. And now our normals got merged with the operator. So let's go to the normals tab here and hit auto smooth. That way it looks good again. So now let's take a look at what we have to do next. It's these little teeth we got there. But before we do that, we have some more cleanup work to do here. So let's go to vertex mode, select these two verts, and then hit M to collapse it. And over here, we want to be doing the same thing. Let's go to the X-ray mode to make sure we really have both selected. Sometimes it works better in the X-ray mode for whatever reason. Let's also collapse it. And then I want to select this edge loop here and dissolve these edges. We don't really need those. I'm gonna join these vertex points here, dissolve this edge, and then do some more cleanup work here where we connect it. Same as here, and this one we can take over there. So here we have some more vertex points that we can join. I mean, often there's a lot of repetitive actions, but I'm still gonna comment on it. But you can always see at the left bottom what I'm doing. So now let's take a look here at the front part, and I wanna be selecting this edge at the bottom and dissolve it. And this one here, I want to join these vertex points. And these ones here as well. And now we can dissolve these two edges here, which are otherwise pointless to have. So let's also connect these two here. And now we pretty much have one segment already cleaned up, but let's take a look at this here, and somehow these are two vertex points. So it didn't get merged properly. For that we're gonna press M and collapse it so that it's only one vertex point, and let's double check this one. This one was merged correctly. So nothing we have to do with it. So now you can see here on the toolbar we have different selection modes, and I want to select the circle select and switch it to face mode. And that way we can easily make a selection here for these parts that we want to have as one segment basically. You will see why in just a moment. We're gonna use more array modifier action on it. But before we do that, let's make sure we have nothing selected that's not supposed to be selected. And then we can press P and separate the selection, and I'm just gonna put the selection back to box mode. So now let's make a little bit of rocket science out of this. Don't worry, it's not gonna be too bad. But let's select these parts, convert it to a face selection, and then also separate it out. I'm gonna hide this part here. And now with that selection on our cylinder, let's go here to the top perspective. And while being in the vertex mode, we're gonna dissolve the vertices here on it. Actually, sorry, let me undo that. We're gonna delete the vertices. And we're gonna hit that X button on the JMesh plugin, but I'm gonna explain something about it. Hey guys, just a quick message basically from the future. And that is that in the latest JMesh versions, these symmetry buttons are missing. So this here is the latest version of JMesh that I have currently installed, and we don't have this anymore. So I was digging in the GitHub for the JMesh plugin, and I found out that the latest version that still supported that is 1.764. So this is basically where you want to roll back to in order to get these buttons back, because ever since version 1.8 it looks different now and we don't have this functionality anymore. However, I just emailed the creator of this plugin, and he's an awesome guy, he's super responsive, and he told me that he plans to bring that back as a feature. So in the meanwhile, if it didn't already come back with the latest version, I recommend you to get 1.764. Check the essential folder for the README, where there's a direct link to all the downloads for the plugins used. And otherwise, just check back for the latest version and see if this is now included. Because with the older version, let me just activate it. It gives me an error, but it actually activated it. It just gets confused because there are two versions. But here with this, you can see how we have this nice feature of quickly doing a slice and a mirror and a weld. This is what that does without adding a modifier. So now that we did that quick mirror, we can now continue with this one piece. And we want to add these little teeth into it. So let's just select everything, and then we hit M and merge by distance. And you can see somewhere we still had some overlaying vertices which are now properly merged. So the next steps we're gonna do is select all the edges around the side, and then we press extrude in the orthographic view, snap it back, and then bring it down perfectly on the Z-axis and also align it on the Z-axis as Z0, and then we fill it. Press F to fill it at the bottom, and we also want to fill this gap here. So now let's select that face here. Let's copy it, snap it back, and then we press P to separate it out. And now what we can do is go to our interactive tools and put the quick origin into the center of this separated element. And we now can basically reuse this for our Boolean operator. I'm gonna extrude it out like this here. And now let's go over to our top perspective. I'm gonna once again put the quick origin so that we have it perfectly centered. I'm gonna rotate it around 90 degrees. And now I go into this front view and bring it down like this here. I'm just gonna zoom in so you can count the steps that I have here. And do the same on your end. I'm gonna bring it over here according to our reference image, even if it might be a little bit hard to see. But now what we can do is go back to our JMesh plugin, and then we want to select this other piece here and put it to difference. So right now we don't have apply immediately checked, which means we can still work on it. Let's take another look. And now with this operator, we're flexible to maybe stretch it a little bit more here into both directions, make it a bit bigger. So let's copy this Boolean operator so that we can reuse it. Gonna copy, right mouse button to snap it back, and then let's hide it for now. We're gonna reactivate it in a moment. Now with this operator, we can apply the selection. And now we have this here already with this shape that we want to have. And all that's left to do is combine that here, the vertex points. And now we can unhide this other piece that we saved basically for future use. And right now I want to get rid of every second edge. So what we're going to do is select it, then go to edge mode and select 2 of these here, and then we can hit Shift, Control and the plus button on the numpad to automate that action. And then we can hit X and dissolve these edges to make it a bit more low poly. And now we're going to go back here and select this piece to be an operator for difference. So now I'm going to switch to the face mode, select this face and drag it out like that. And you can see that way we already get more this shape that we want to have. But now I'm going to select everything with A and scale it a bit more here so that it's not so big. I'm also going to scale it globally so that it's much smaller as it was before. And now we can carefully lower it down here. And with that in place, we can then apply this. And that gives us this nice shape here. So now we just have a bit of cleanup work to do. And we want to just connect these vertex points here. So basically we do that on both sides. And then here at the front, at that side, we also want to connect it. So this is always important, or else we produce n-gons. And we want to minimize that as much as possible. So now I'm going to select that face at the bottom, and then I hit Ctrl and plus to grow the selection. And with that selected, we can then get rid of it. So make sure it looks like that before you delete the faces, and also that face we can delete again. We only added these elements so that the Boolean doesn't get problems. Now we're going to make use of the circle array 8 times and hit close, not apply. Because closing means we still have the modifier on and not confirmed. And this is important because now what we want to do is actually toggle that off here. And I just forgot to also connect these vertex points here. So this is why it's always a good idea to keep the modifiers on as long as possible before we then finally confirm the action. Now I'm gonna toggle the view back on and everything looks good, so I'm gonna apply it now. Now with Shift, let's also select these elements here. So that means we have the front, the side, as well as the back. And we can then hit Ctrl J so that this is all one element, as you can see when we toggle it. Now let's go into the vertex mode. Let's select everything and we want to merge by distance. On my end it says 703 vertices merged. Basically just make sure that if you circle around like that, everything looks good and nothing looks like it got merged where it's not supposed to be. And that's also why we have a very low threshold when we merge. So now let's select these circle empty things that gets produced when we use JMesh. We don't need those. And now we want to go over to our edge mode, select sharp edges, and we just have to manually add a few more to it, or we can try here with the sharpness angle. I'm gonna lower that. Once again, let's make sure we have the proper selection, and now we can put the mean crease on that. So here you see exactly the edges that I have selected and which we now want to add the crease to in preparation for our remesher. So we just have to individually select also this edge here, which wasn't picked up by this sharp angle. So with that, we can then also add that to our crease. So before we do the remesher action on it, let's go over here and create a material for the cylinder. Over here on the upper right, we have to go to material mode. We're gonna assign this, and then let's put some nice gloss on it, as well as making it metallic. And that way we can sometimes better see how well our remeasure works on something. Let's unhide our bullet underscore high. We're gonna then select the cylinder and one of these bullet elements and then Ctrl L and copy our modifiers. So now you'll see that we have the modifier stack from the bullet copied over here to the cylinder. And basically that makes it as easy as copy and pasting to create our high poly then. So it's gonna take quite a while to load. I actually cut that part out. You're gonna have to wait probably 2 minutes. But now you can see we have this, and we have also the option then to individually go into our settings. And for example, we wanna increase our corrective smooth, which in that case I'm gonna put to 100. This is also gonna take a while to load. It's because of the decimate modifier, which makes it take so long. But you can see now that this is quite the high poly we have here. There are some tiny fragments from the decimation. So maybe in case of the cylinder, we wanna disable it at the end. But overall, it's not too bad. I think I'm just gonna leave it like that. So now I'm gonna toggle off our modifier stack again so that we have the best performance. And now that I look at it, there's something I don't really like, which is this element we added here at the end, which should be much bigger to the sides. So unfortunately, because we already collapsed our stack for it, we now have to go into our face mode and individually select all these tiny elements. And I'm gonna go back here to this circle selection for that. So that way, if we press Shift, we can then add to our selection and basically just quickly paint over it instead of having to select every face one by one. So this is actually quite a useful feature, this selection type here. And yeah, we just want to make sure we don't select something by mistake. So always double check for that. And in that case, it looks like everything is fine. And now with that selection, what we can do is, first of all, I want to push it a bit more here to that side. And then we go to the scale mode and scale it only here on the Y-axis. So that way it's now looking much better as before.